Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you happen to be around the world, and welcome to another Agency Success live stream from hosting.com. My name is Nathan Ingram, and I am the host, the agency trainer here at hosting.com. And we're talking about a subject that lots of folks have questions about. We get questions all the time in our weekly office hours about this, and that is Cloudflare and how to get the best out of Cloudflare for your work, either for your own website or for clients. Now, this is part two of a two-part live stream series. We did the first one just a couple of weeks ago with Cloudflare Basics. And today we're talking about Cloudflare Advanced. So if you're just joining us in Zoom, let me invite you to open up the chat. I'm going to drop in the link to download this guide that's on the screen now that is all about Cloudflare. And we're going to dive in. So just a couple of bits of introduction and we'll hit it because we have a lot to cover today. This again is part two. So if you missed part one, the basics, I would strongly encourage you to go rewatch that. Simply because we walk through what I think is one of the more confusing points of Cloudflare, which is the difference between the account dashboard and the zone or domain dashboard. They look the same. It's easy to get confused where you are and why the menus are different. It's something I hear a lot from folks that are getting lost in Cloudflare. They're in the wrong spot. And so we talk through those two dashboards, what's there and available for you, and most importantly, the particular things in both the account and domain dashboards that you'll likely use the most. So you can watch this. This is here in today's guide. There's a link to watch the video replay of part one, as well as a link to the downloadable guide for part one. So I would recommend that you take a look at that if you haven't already. Now, we gave this graphic in part one as well, which I find very helpful to piece together what is doing what in my security strategy. And so, a lot of times, especially if, you just kind of started with WordPress, like many of us did, without kind of a holistic networking background of, how security works and how a security system for your website ought to be designed, it's very easy to just install a WordPress security plugin and think that's all you need to do. And that's really not the best way to go about security for your WordPress site because we need a three-level approach to security. Yes, we want to have a good WordPress security plugin that's handling what it should do, which is application security, user security, not malware scanning, not any kind of firewall necessarily, but good WordPress application security for things like passkeys and vulnerable login protection and those sorts of things to keep WordPress itself secure. Then we move out to the middle ring, which is server security. And you want to be with a good host like hosting.com. That offers something like Immunify 360 or something like Monarchs that's going to protect your server. So the server itself has a good security solution. And then we step out to the network level, which is where Cloudflare comes in. So Cloudflare's job in this structure is to filter or block malicious traffic before your server ever has to respond to it. Now, there's deep benefits in this because even if, let's just say, your WordPress security plugin puts a CAPTCHA on the WordPress login page and you're getting hammered away by bot attacks on your login page, well, they may not be able to log in because of the CAPTCHA. However, WordPress still has to serve that login page hundreds and thousands of times. And that can really start to draw your server resources. So we want to block that stuff way out at the network at the Cloudflare level before it ever hits your server at all. So there's great benefit in designing a strategy this way. And I go into more depth in that on the first stream. I'd recommend you watch it. All right, so here's what we're looking at today. Basically, 3 buckets of content in today's live stream. First, we're going to unpack Cloudflare's security rules. And I'm going to give you a safe 3-set rule that you can apply, and it shouldn't, asterisk, you always want to test it, but it shouldn't cause any issues with any site that you use these rules on. Second, we're going to get into speed and some of the most important settings that you can turn on in Cloudflare that are helpful. And finally, Cloudflare caching and how that works. So those are our 3 areas of content today. And then I'll have just a couple of notes right at the end about next steps and so forth. Now, let me invite you to please, if you have questions, I probably will not have time today to respond to immediate questions in the chat unless I just happen to see them at that moment. But please use the Zoom Q&A to ask your questions. And at the end of the live stream, we'll go back through those Zoom Q&As and knock those out. All right. So I'm going to drop in one more time the link to today's handout, if it's going to cooperate, right there in the Zoom chat, just in case you missed it coming in late. Okay. So let's start talking about Cloudflare security rules. And it may be that one of the things that got your attention about Cloudflare is maybe you saw people on social media talking about, oh, there's, you put these WAF rules in place and block traffic and it'll make your site more secure. And that's where a lot of us got our attention about, oh, this is interesting. Maybe we should look into this. And so this is perhaps the most powerful way to use Cloudflare, but also the most breakable thing you can do, because unless you really understand what you're doing with these security rules, you can inadvertently block good traffic to your website. And so we're going to talk more about that, but it's really important that we understand what these rules are and when and where we should apply them. So a security rule in Cloudflare is basically, it acts like a traffic filter. It evaluates requests coming into your site, visitors or bots coming into your site, and then based on the criteria in that rule, it's going to perform one of 3 specific actions. It's going to block the traffic, it's going to challenge the traffic with some sort of a CAPTCHA, or it's going to allow that traffic based on the conditions that you've defined. So the best way to start thinking about security rules, it's going to do one of those 3 things. Either block it completely, allow it completely, or put a challenge in the middle to make sure that traffic is legitimate. It's a human that can click a box. So this skip block challenge framework is, once you start to understand that and see how it works, these rules start to become a little easier to understand. So they're pretty simple. Skip, again, just means trust the traffic, allow it, pass. And one of the options in the skip rule that we'll see in a minute is to skip all the rest of the rules. So if my traffic meets this criteria, we're going to skip it for all the other rules so it doesn't get challenged and it just automatically passes through. Then it could also be used to completely reject traffic with a block. And this is really good for known bad bots or blocks of IP addresses called ASNs. Basically, that's just like a number that stands for hundreds, perhaps thousands of IP addresses based on the provider of that traffic. And you can block a whole ASN, and we'll see how in one set of security rules they do that. And then again, challenge, we just ask for a proof of human. And perhaps you've seen this as you go into a site, it'll have a little spinning item and say, are you human, right? We're evaluating the traffic. Cloudflare is evaluating. Are you human? Check the box. You're good. That is what Cloudflare calls a managed challenge, and that's one of our options. Now, Cloudflare gives us 5 custom rule slots on a free plan. You don't have to pay anything for these, and that's pretty darn cool. So 5 free rule slots, and you really honestly can build a strong baseline with just 3 rule spots, and that leaves you 2 open for customization. Now we'll pause just for a second here and go outside the handout and say this. What we've done in my agency is we have a custom rule set. It's a 3 rule set that we apply to all of our websites in the agency. And then we have 2 custom rules that can be used to sharpen traffic for that particular site. And my encouragement to you, even if you don't do exactly that, is if you're managing a bunch of websites, you really want to try to keep your Cloudflare rules as consistent as you can, just so you don't go crazy. Like future you may not remember that you did this customization on this thing and whatever. So as much similarity as you can have between your standard rules, that's best. And then add custom rules on a site as it's needed. Does that make sense? So just thinking systematically, that's how I would encourage you to lean as you're planning out how you're going to roll out Cloudflare rules for yourself. Now, oh, yes, I did. I knew I forgot one thing here. So, in addition to those 5 free rules, Cloudflare also includes, by default, its own free managed rule set. Now, I'm just going to click into this real quick just so you can see, you can learn more about it here. But I'm going to click details here because this is the change log and it shows you what's being added to and removed from this standard rule set. Cloudflare, if your site is in Cloudflare, it's already benefiting from this as long as that traffic is proxied, like we talked about last week. So as long as Cloudflare is active on an A record or whatever on your site, it has this managed rule set. And Cloudflare is keeping this up in the background, like it's known exploits, it's 0-day exploits, all these things. And you can see, some Nginx vulnerabilities that are there. There's like some Java deserial, like you can scroll down here and just see all of the things in this super long change log, and they're keeping this up in the background, and you don't have to do anything about this. This just happens automatically. You don't have to use a custom rule on it or anything. It's just always working in their managed rule set. Make sense? Okay. So the other thing I'll tell you here, in those free rules, the order matters. So Cloudflare treats those security rules that we're going to add in just a minute like a waterfall. So it starts with the first one, it goes to the second one, goes to the third, it processes them in order. So this order really does matter, especially like if you're blocking traffic in rule 2, say, and then you have a rule in rule 3 that would have allowed that traffic, well, it's going to get blocked because it got blocked earlier up in the waterfall. Makes sense? So the order matters, and we need to pay attention to how we're ordering our Cloudflare rules so we have the right sequence happening. All right, so let's take a look at these basic 3 rules. Now, these are just the starting point. They are far less detailed than the ones I use for my agency. And there are other, I'll give you a link in a minute to look at a more thorough rule set. But what I wanted to do today is just to explain what these rules are and to give you some starter rules that I think shouldn't break anything. I should have put about 8 asterisks after that because, as always, y'all, this is provided with, I'm not going to be tech support for you. So you want to test this and make sure it's working and not blocking anything. But as much as I can tell right now, this should not affect negatively your site in any way. These are all pretty safe rules, but as always, test security rules before you add them, or, add them on a site that is maybe not the highest priority site that you have, just in case for some weird reason, one of these doesn't work for your site. I cannot think of how it would, but that's just my little warning. Okay. So let's take a look at this Cloudflare rule set. So we're going to go back to our test domain here, purplebeagle.org that we looked at last time in the intro. We're going to go down here to security and go into security rules. So this is the spot where we go in and take a look at all of our rules. So we are now going to look at creating our first rule. So the first rule, this is a safe rule. This is our WordPress login challenge rule. And what this is going to do is at the network level, before we even get to the WordPress login page, it's going to challenge any traffic that's trying to log into WordPress. So what this does, if you have this rule in effect, you don't have to have a plugin put either a reCAPTCHA or a Cloudflare Turnstile or whatever on your login form, because the same job is being done at the network level before the traffic even hits your server, and that's the best way to do this. If you're getting attacked on the login page, you want that stuff to be mitigated out in the network. It doesn't consume any of your server resources to deal with it that way. All right, so let's start by adding a new rule. So we're going to add a custom rule here. We're going to call this our WordPress login challenge rule. All right, now I've given you what could potentially be, if you're not familiar with anything Cloudflare, a very scary looking expression. The reason I've done it this way is that you can copy and paste this into Cloudflare and it'll parse it out just right for you. So I'm going to paste this in, then I'll show you how the visual editor works. So let's copy this And the way you do this, now there's a visual builder here that you can manually, just with choosing words from the drop down, build your own rule simpler. But if you're bringing in a rule from someone else, this is the easier way to do it. We're just going to click Edit Expression and paste this. Boom. And then you go back to Expression Builder. Uh-oh. See, I was afraid this might happen when it turned into a PDF, and it's probably this line break. Yes, it is. Okay. So I apologize. This is the nature of the PDF. It added line breaks in here. So just go delete the line breaks out of these expressions. I apologize. That was unavoidable. So we'll paste this in. Now, when we look at the expression builder, see, it's kind of built out here. Now you can sort of see much easier what's going on. So if the path coming in contains WP login, well, that's everything in WordPress. Even if you go to WP admin and you're logged out, it sends you back to wp-login.php. So this says, all right, if the path contains WP login, we're going to challenge it. If it contains my account, that's what WooCommerce uses, or login, or sign in, or if your site has a different URL for where to log in, like if you've changed that, or you have like a front end user login, then yeah, you can add that URL here. Now, a note, I know some people like to build it where the actual login is in the header of the site. It's not a great practice, like where it has the username and password and the login button up in the header. You may have seen those. Not a great idea because you can't protect that login. So, you're going to get hammered. You're asking for bot attacks by doing that. So it's always better to have a single page with its own little URL where you can protect it, either with a CAPTCHA or better with this network layer manage challenge. All right, so we pasted in our expression. We took out the line breaks. And then we went back into Expression Builder. So pasted it in, Expression Builder. Now we can see it more easily. And now we're going to do the next thing, which is we're going to set it for a managed challenge. So the action here is managed challenge. That's essentially like Cloudflare Turnstile, but coming in through the network layer. Okay, there's a question in the chat that I think I'm going to address because Shauna sees this expression here that has HTTP. So this has nothing to do with like HTTPS in your URL. This is just Cloudflare's expression. It's just saying if the HTTP request, the URI path contains this is just Cloudflare's expression. So disregard that. This is not like HTTP versus HTTPS. This is Cloudflare's nomenclature of how they build expressions. Does that make sense? It's a great question. I didn't even think about covering that, but there it is. All right, so we've done our managed challenge. We've got our expression in. We've got our action. We hit deploy, and boom, our rule is in, and it's active. Yay, us. All right. So it is active at number 1. Super. Let's move on to the next one. Now, the next one is a country challenge. Now, I'm in the US, so the example I've given is in the US. Whatever country you're in, the goal here is there's probably, for, let's say it's a business website or whatever, there's probably only a few countries at most that your website needs to be available to. And so with most, I'm speaking as a person from the USA, and wherever you are in Canada or in Europe or in Australia or wherever, most of your traffic is coming from your country of origin or very close to you, right? And so a lot of the attacks coming in are coming from countries that you really don't want that traffic coming to the website anyway. And so it's a good idea to filter that traffic, either with a challenge rule or with a block rule altogether. So we're going to configure this as a block rule, and I'm going to use this one here. This is basically going to say if the traffic is not coming from the US or Canada, we're going to block it. So let's create a rule, custom rules. Forgot to copy that. This is our country challenge, and we're going to go into our expression builder. We're going to copy this bit here, paste it in there, and look at it in the builder. There we go. Now, this makes it really easy to add more countries. So let's say, we probably do want Australia here. Maybe we want UK. Whoop, Um, it's GB. You want to, there we go. And so you can continue stacking, whatever countries you need to add to this rule, you can just keep stacking them across. But the rule of thumb is, why make the website available in an open target to areas that you're not trying to do business in anyway, right? And there legitimately may be websites that, maybe they're informational websites and you want them to be available globally. You wouldn't use this rule. But if it's a small air conditioning repair place in Chicago, Illinois, well, they really probably don't want traffic outside the US, right? Does it make sense? So we want to narrow the scope with a rule like this. Then we can choose either another challenge rule or a block rule altogether. And that's going to now effectively block any traffic that's not in that list of countries that I just created. Does that make sense? Now, you can, instead of doing a block for this country challenge rule, you can say, I want this to be a challenge instead. And that's a little safer of a rule because let's say there is a potential customer and they're traveling, or as somebody just mentioned in the chat, maybe they're using a VPN or whatever. This would be a challenge that's presented instead of a block. Now, what does a challenge look like? Let's see if it's going to challenge me here. It may not because I'm logged in. Yeah, see, this is a managed challenge. So it challenged me and then it passed me through because it knew my traffic was legitimate. I didn't have to interact with it. It just took a second for it to, is he for real? Is he legitimate? Yes. Okay, we'll pass the challenge through. What you just saw is an example of that first skip rule that was protecting the login page here on wpnathan.com. And so that's what people would experience. Now, the question in the chat actually was, what happens if it's a person from another country and they're using a VPN to appear as though they're from a different country? Well, Cloudflare can only go so far. It's going to look at what the traffic appears to be coming in. And so it's whatever traffic that VPN is masking as from. So if in my VPN location, I'm connecting from London, then my traffic to Cloudflare looks like it's coming from London. That's the way that works. All right. Everybody good? Okay. So let's take a look at another one. Let's go back to, did we save this? There we go. Let's go back to another one. And this is the WordPress exploit path rule. So what we're going to do is we're going to block any requests to our site that have no legitimate reason to have traffic to them. And so let's create this rule. So another custom rule. We'll call it our WordPress exploit path block, and let's copy this expression. And then we'll get into exactly what it says. Oh, got more line breaks. Okay. So with this, we don't want any of this traffic. We're gonna add block and deploy. Boom. Okay. So what does this actually do? Oh, look. If somebody's trying to come in and hit XMLRPC, which is a very vulnerable point of WordPress, there's all the time XMLRPC attacks. We're blocking all that traffic. Now, if you're using a site that's using Jetpack or one of the other few plugins that still actually use XMLRPC, you can't use this part of the rule. Like, you would just delete that because you're blocking traffic that you actually need here. So, but we don't use any sites, right? I had to do the calculation. I don't believe we use any sites right now, and all the sites that we manage as an agency that are needing XMLRPC. And so this is in our standard rule set. We're just blocking all that traffic. Now, yes, I know there are WordPress plugins that you can check the box, block XMLRPC. But why do that at the WordPress level and consume server resources and WordPress resources to block that, when instead you could block it at the network before it ever comes in, right? See how that works? And again, nobody from the outside should ever be trying to access wp-config from a browser. That's just not how it works, right? This one, I actually see this in block rules, even still today. The WLW manifest is the old, ancient, long retired Windows Live writer. Now, if you're a WordPress geezer like myself, back in the day, and by day, I mean like the aughts, 2008, 2009. There was this delightful app called Windows Live Writer that you could connect to WordPress, and you could write your blog and publish it from this Windows app. And that's still out there. And I think WordPress even supports it still in core. I can't remember. Anyway, we don't want that traffic. Nobody's using that anymore. We block it at the network. And again, WordPress doesn't use ASP. If we opened up just a typical site that I manage and we looked at the exploits, there's so many calls out to ASP endpoints, something.asp. Well, that's a Microsoft server, right? We're not going to have any of that traffic. We're going to block all of that at the network, and it just filters out all that noise that your server would otherwise have had to deal with. And honestly, it can reduce the number of the amount of resources your server needs just by filtering out all that noise at the network. All right. So those are our 3 WordPress exploits. And I want to give you one more here. This is optional rule 0, the skip rule. Now, notice that the examples here in the security rules, we've got 2 managed challenges and a block. So there's not an example of a skip rule. Now, the skip rule is oftentimes one of your most important rules because it's how you allow legitimate known good traffic to your website. So for example, one of the typical things is, oh, my uptime monitor is being blocked by Cloudflare. When I first started using Cloudflare many years ago, we set up some Cloudflare rules on our sites. We were very proud of ourselves. And all of a sudden, our uptime monitor is going absolutely bonkers because to it, all the sites just went down. That was not fun. So we had to go back in and add to our skip rule. This was many years ago. I didn't have any concept of how this really worked. And we had to add the agent for our uptime monitor to our skip rule. Now, you can do this a couple of different ways. You can skip based on a user agent. Now, a user agent, you can Google it, but quick explanation is when the traffic comes into your website, it identifies itself and says, hey, I'm Better Uptime, or hey, I'm Stripe, or hey, I'm Chromium version, blah, 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 or, whatever. So that's the user agent. And that's oftentimes the simplest way to allow a tool like Better Uptime or your Uptime Monitor to actually access your site. A lot of times services will, let's say you're using SEMrush or Ahrefs or some SEO tool. They'll give you a block of IP addresses and you can paste those in here to your skip rule. But let's just do one as an example. This is going to be skip rule. And that's a custom rule right here. And we're going to say, I'm actually going to configure this manually here. So we want our user agent to equal Better Uptime. Now, one little pro tip. This is case sensitive. So, and I've seen some user agents where they're camel case one word, or they're separated by a word, and maybe the second word is not capitalized. It's got to be exact. So it's got to match, no spaces. If it has no, whatever capitalization matters, it's got to be exact. So in this case, if the user agent equals Better Uptime, we are going to skip this traffic. Now, notice what just happened. When I choose skip, a whole bunch of extra stuff unlocks down here. Now, this is what I recommend. You can do however you want to here, but what I recommend is not logging matching requests, because I have a lot of legitimate traffic and all that does is clutter up my logs. So I don't really care, like it's legitimate traffic. Unless I'm having a problem, then I'll turn this toggle back on to look at the logging. But generally speaking, I don't want to log skipped traffic. And then here's the importance of the order. So I want it to skip all the rules that are left. So if I have specifically, I'm just going to check all of these boxes, because if I have specifically filtered out this traffic as known good, I want it to skip everything else in the list. Don't bother it. It's good traffic. I want to let it through no matter what. Now, that being said, before you make a skip rule, make very certain that this is the traffic that you want to let through unchallenged no matter what, because that's what you're going to do. So I turn off logging, check all the boxes, and now place order first in the list and deploy. So now this is the first rule. And so When that better uptime user agent comes in, it gets to skip all the rest of the rules because it's known good, trusted traffic. Make sense? Now, if you forget to check, drop that down and choose first, these are draggable. Like you can grab these things and drop them and whatever. You can always reorder here in this list, but it's just easier to choose it right there. All right, I'm going to pause for a second. How you doing? Quick check-in. Everybody okay? Does it make sense? Okay, there is a challenge rule question in the Q&A I'm going to get to real quick. So Bonnie asks regarding rule 1 login challenge. So we don't need to do anything in the dashboard with Turnstile. Just put this at the Cloudflare level. Yes, as long as Cloudflare is proxying the traffic to your website, which is, the A record and the www records are proxied, then it's handling that job at the network level. Yep. Okie dokie. Let's see. Sue is asking, do I know the user agent for what used to be solid WP? I do not. That's something you'd have to, it's out there. You can find it. You'd have to ask support or their docs. Phoebe's asking, can you give a challenge to everyone who uses Gmail? I wish. No, unfortunately not, because the fact that they use Gmail, maybe. And this gets way. I'm gonna answer this in like 5 seconds. It's not gonna be complete. And Phoebe, maybe this is a good office hours question, but you might be able to target traffic from Gmail with a referrer. So, like, if we were just to add something to our challenge rule here, and say, or I think, referrer equals or something. Maybe Gmail. I don't know. What you want to do is find traffic in your analytics that shows that it's from Gmail and find something about that to filter here. Does that make sense? This is bigger than what we can cover today, but in concept, possibly using the referrer rule. It just depends. Like if they click a link in Gmail, but if they just have a Gmail address, there's no way to filter traffic based on that. Eddie is asking, can Cloudflare challenge post comments? No, because that's just based on the URL. In that case, you would want like a Cloudflare Turnstile widget as part of your comments flow. All right, we'll save the rest to the end. Everybody good? Okay, that is Cloudflare rules. Now, if you want a more thorough rule set, my advice is to go check out my buddy Troy Glancy's website. Here, he gives a very thorough, and by thorough, I mean really thorough set of Cloudflare rules. Follow his instructions, but follow all of his instructions, okay? Because thorough rules are great, but they're a double-edged sword. They are great at blocking traffic, which means they're great at blocking traffic. We have found, for example, that one of the ASNs that's in this range was used by VPN traffic that one of our clients was using. And so it blocked everybody's traffic. It did a great job at blocking the wrong traffic, right? But I mean, Troy didn't know, and they were using this weird VPN and whatever, but you just need to understand what you're doing before you start implementing any of these security rules and making sure that the traffic you're blocking is actually traffic you want to block. Makes sense? But this is Troy's brilliant on this stuff, and I highly recommend his Web Agency Hero as a resource. Okay, one little bit here before we move on to speed, and that is, what do we do if we have a problem with a Cloudflare security rule? So your friend here in the security dashboard is the analytics events area. So right here, I think we might have just filtered BG. Did we get you, BG? Somebody from Germany just got filtered just not long ago. So I apologize. Our rule set was blocking you out. So it probably let you in, but see what happened here? It was one of our custom rules that blocked this traffic. And if we dig into this, we can see what was going on. So, oh no, you know what? This was, I don't know, maybe this was not anybody on the live stream, but it was actually malicious traffic because I don't know that they're trying to go to admin install. That's not good. So what do you do? Let's just say it happened to be legitimate traffic. or your client says, hey, we're getting blocked, somebody's getting blocked, whatever. The easiest way to diagnose what's happening is to look for the Ray ID. So here in this example, you'll see there's this Ray ID. It's a um, uh, letters and numbers string here, and you'll see that typically on the page where the error exists. So what we'll often do is tell our client, hey, look, just take a screenshot or look for the Ray ID on this page and send it to us. And with that, what you can do is go up here to right here to our events traffic. We can add a filter. I'm just going to copy this Ray ID as an example. And you can click add filter and filter by the Ray ID, paste it in there, and it will pull up just that traffic that matches the Ray ID. Now, those Ray IDs are unique to every single error that happens on your Cloudflare. So it's that specific. It's like a fingerprint for that exact time where they were blocked or challenged or whatever. So that's the easiest way for you to look at, oh, okay, maybe this was supposed to be legitimate. Well, what was the problem? Maybe we need to allow this AS number or allow this IP address, or, what is it about this traffic that we can then put into a skip rule to filter it? Okay, does that make sense? So we want the Ray ID is the easiest way into that. Now, a lot of times people won't be able to provide that for you. So what do? Well, then you get through the slog of having to go through some of these, about what time did it happen? Do you remember? And blah, 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 and try to find something that might match. And you have to kind of wade through stuff, unfortunately. It's so much easier if you have the Ray ID. Now, if it's a webhook that's being blocked, you can a lot of times get that from the response headers from the webhook. If you know how that works and how to do that, then you know what that means and how to do that. Otherwise, you're down to searching analytics manually, approximate time of the block. That's no fun. But once you find it, you just modify your skip rule to allow that traffic and figure out why it was being blocked to begin with. All right. So I've given you that whole flow right here. And just for the sake of time, I am going to keep moving. Couple of other little notes here. Right here where we were, security, analytics, and traffic. This isn't a very good. Let's go to WP Nathan here, or if I can find it. All domains. Actually take a quick look at broader analytics because, my goodness. Here we go. This one's got some good traffic. Yeah, so you can start to see, what is Cloudflare doing for me here? Well, in the last 24 hours, on a junk site like WP Nathan, that's just a demo site for these live streams, 7,300 bits of traffic mitigated by Cloudflare. It lets you know how much Cloudflare is caching versus the server, gives you some decent statistics. Anyway, if you like stats, you can dig into this, and there's some fun stuff. Fun for those of us who like nerdy things. Okay, one other little bit here is, let's see, it's security rules. Oh, well, we'll just say this. Look, the security is an area that is under active development by Cloudflare. There was a major redesign of the security area in March of last year, and it's still slowly rolling out. You may not have seen it yet, especially on some older sites, but there is a toggle if you want to go back and forth, but eventually it's going to look like what you have here. But if for some reason you're looking at your security and it doesn't look exactly like what I just showed you, you don't have the new interface, and you can toggle that on here at security settings and this toggle. Okay, let's move forward into the area of Cloudflare Speed. This is actually a quick one, but I want you to show you what's available at no cost. And most of these you're probably going to want to make use of. If I've given you the example here in the handout, it's generally safe to use. Just test it, right? Just make sure. So what we're going to do is speed optimization, content optimization. So here in the menu, speed, and again, okay, speed settings, sorry about that, content optimization. Now, let's talk about SpeedBrain. So what SpeedBrain does is at the network level, it starts using the speculation rules API. Now, what in the world does that mean? It means that Cloudflare is going to start looking at all the links on the page that your visitor is viewing and preloading those in its cache so that when your visitor clicks on one of those, it feels lightning fast because all that stuff is preloaded. Now, there's not really a good reason not to do this. It works really, really well. They do say it's in beta, but we never have any problems with this. It's quite good, actually. And so do that at the network level. It's going to it doesn't speed your site up. It just makes it feel faster because while they're viewing the current page, it's loading all that stuff in the background. So when click, boom, there's your next link. This is definitely a toggle on. We're going to toggle on Cloudflare fonts. So what this is going to do, if you're using Google Fonts, this is a way to get away from the privacy issues associated with Google Fonts. So Cloudflare is going to serve those from the network in a way that is privacy friendly and eliminates that extra call out to Google and the extra DNS handshake that's needed. So it speeds things up. It makes things private. It's just good. Turn it on. It's a good thing. The next one here we're going to toggle on is early hints. Now, early hints means how do I explain this? So somebody requests your page and your server may be taking a minute to think about the HTML that it's going to deliver. But in the meantime, Cloudflare is going to allow the browser to be downloading the CSS and fonts and JavaScript and that sort of thing while the server is still responding so that it feels faster. Now, this is important because Cloudflare is caching your CSS and JavaScript in its data centers at the edge, really close to the visitor. And so by doing this, all that stuff is there. And while the server is responding with the HTML, it's already handing off the assets to the browser. So it's just it's a no-brainer. You should generally, in most cases, do this. Smart hints is something like here. I've already signed up for it here. There's normally like a sign up link here. It's still in early access. It's been that way for a long time. I'm not sure why it's taking this long, but it basically kind of builds on early hints to do it better. So just go ahead and click sign up if it's there for you and get in the list. Now, right here, let me pause right here. Rocket Loader. This sounds great. It's got a wonderful name. I want my site to be rocket fast. Toggle on without knowing what it does. It's going to improve the paint time for pages with JavaScript. That sounds great, right? What could go wrong? Many, many, many things can go wrong here. Do not use Rocket Loader if you're using WordPress. It causes, it might work and you might not see any issues, but if you toggle that on and don't understand what's happening, it likely is going to get in the way of the way WordPress is doing JavaScript, especially if there's interactions. A lot of times it impacts forms. It's just bad and it causes flaky things to happen, and you'll waste half a day figuring this out until you realize, turn on Rocket Loader, and that was the deal. So just don't turn this on. It's not worth it. And I believe that's the last one. We'll talk a little bit about APO in a minute, but that's it here. So these features, SpeedBrain, Cloudflare fonts, early hints, and smart hints, do it. Do not do Rocket Loader. Okay. One more little thing to do here while we're under speed and settings is go back up to the top here for protocol optimization and go ahead and toggle on the zero RTT. And basically, it just makes the handshake with SSL go faster, especially for mobile devices. Toggle it on. You don't need to even understand the tech. It just works. It's great. You should do it. Okay, pausing just for a minute. That was just a little bit of stuff. Toggle that stuff on. You're going to be good. It's free. Use Cloudflare Speed. It's great. Everybody good with that? Any questions about that before I move on to the final bit? Stacy says, Cloudflare fonts, do you prefer this over installing them locally? You can do both. But the nice thing is if you do it at the Cloudflare level, the network is delivering those. So it's another hit your server doesn't have to do. All righty, let's move on to the final bit here. Now, warning, Cloudflare caching is complicated. So I'm going to do the best I can in the last 15 minutes here to give the basic version of how Cloudflare caching works and what you can do without a lot of problems, okay? There are ways that you can leverage Cloudflare caching to do fantastic things for speed, but it can also break things. Like any optimization strategy that you have, you know that you can optimize and it'll be fast, but things don't work correctly. So you have to figure out, I'm going to give you the safest things to do. And if you want to dig into this, I recommend it. There's a lot of docs out there from Cloudflare, or your AI tool can help you figure these things out. There's even more meat on the bone after we're done here. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this, which I find that a lot of folks don't understand. And that is the difference between Cloudflare caching and WordPress caching. So a lot of folks think, oh, I don't need a WordPress cache because Cloudflare's doing caching. That is not correct. You need both. So your WordPress caching plugin are not even competing with each other. They are stacked layers, and you need both in place to get the most out of your speed. So a WordPress caching plugin is caching pages on the server itself. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's say you've got a page that's got a bunch of blog posts, the last 3 posts and some events and that sort of thing. Well, we don't want every single visitor that comes to the site to have to go out to the database, grab those things and make the page and whatever every single time. That's super slow. Going out to the database is super slow. It's the slowest thing WordPress does. So we want to have a cache in place, which is basically we go out there, we grab it once. Now there's this pre-rendered HTML page sitting out there that has the last 3 events, that has the last 3 blog posts, and we're just going to hand the visitor the HTML page pre-rendered. That is much faster. So that's what the WordPress caching plugin does. And you need one of those. Otherwise, every single visitor is having to grab the database, and your server resources are going to get drained quickly if you're not using a caching plugin. Now, Cloudflare caching, Cloudflare is caching assets out at the edge. And the edge means all Cloudflare's data centers around the world. So if your user is in Dallas, Texas, and Cloudflare has a data center in Dallas, Texas, which they do, that's what's sending them the data. And it's much faster because it's local to them, fewer hops along the internet. It's just much faster. So it's caching your stuff out there, and Cloudflare is intelligently serving the user the information from the closest possible data center to the user. It's brilliant. It works, and it's free. Now, here's how it works, okay? Visitor wants to go to a web page. Oh, if everything's cached out at the Cloudflare edge, it just serves right from Cloudflare. It's great. Let's say, okay, well, we go, the user wants something. It's not here. It's going to go to our actual server, and the server cache is going to send back the response. Well, now, okay, we go here. Okay, it's not at the edge. It's not even on our server yet. Maybe we just cleared the cache and no new HTML cached page has been formed yet. Then our server has to go through that whole process of PHP and MySQL to make the cache to hand back to the user. So we need all of these things working well, right? Is this pausing for a moment? Does that land? See how this works? We need both a WordPress cache and the Cloudflare cache for max speed. So we want both of these things. Cloudflare's cache is caching assets by default. And by assets, I mean, potentially images, if you have Cloudflare images turned on, definitely CSS, definitely JavaScript, perhaps your fonts, if we toggled that on. It's caching assets out there. It does not automatically cache HTML by default. It's still, your visitor's still grabbing that from your server. Now, you can enable HTML caching, either through a Cloudflare cache rule or through automated platform optimization, which we'll hit in just a minute. That's a paid service. But I can't talk about, there's not enough room in this live stream to talk about HTML caching. It's potentially incredible for site speed, because it could be that Cloudflare serves everything right at the edge, the images, the JavaScript, the CSS, the HTML, all that stuff, and a request from a user never even hits your server. It's just all served from the edge at Cloudflare super fast near the user. The potential there is great. And if you're a speed nerd, dig into this, because you could find that with good page cache rules, you could really up your site speed. It's way beyond our ability to cover today. So Cloudflare cache rules are how you tell the cache to cache things it wouldn't normally cache, including HTML. So those live here under caching and cache rules. They work a lot like security rules. You define them just like you would, create a rule and so forth. They are processed in order like security rules. This is getting into granularity that we simply can't cover today. But that's where it is. And if you want to dig into it, there's huge opportunity for site speed that lives here. Okay, now let me just mention this. This is very important because we know we still need a WordPress cache. So what WordPress caching plugin should I use? Now, if you are on one of Hosting.com's VPS or virtual dedicated servers or a Lightspeed server on some other host, you want to use the Lightspeed cache plugin. This is the free one from WordPress. This is the one you want to use because it works really well with the server software that powers your server. Now, if you're on hosting.com, there's a great doc here that will show you how to do that. And also, a lot of folks have not configured the object cache. Like you may be on hosting.com and you've got the Lightspeed cache running. There's even still another opportunity for speed with an object cache. Again, it's broader than we can get into today, but there's a great article here right in the doc about how to configure the Redis object cache on a hosting.com server. I would recommend that you do it. It really speeds things up. Now, if you're on hosting.com's managed WordPress hosting by Rocket.net, Rocket.net gives you free the WP Rocket plugin. It's very expensive usually, but they bundle that with any Rocket.net hosting plan, and they have a doc on what to turn on and what to turn off in WP Rocket. So if that's you and you're on that platform, there's a great doc that'll walk you through what to turn on, what to turn off. Now, if you're on some other host, there's lots of different caching plugins out there, but probably the simplest, easiest one to set up and configure that just works is WP Super Cache from Automatic. You just turn it on and it makes page cache, and it works really well with Cloudflare. So if you're not on hosting.com, that's an easy alternative. Now, there are some caching settings here that are worth turning on. So let's go take a look at those. So we're going to go to caching and configuration. All right, so there are some things here we want to be aware of. Smart tiered, did they just change this again? So you may have to look slightly different here. I apologize. Okay, first of all, we're going to look at the browser cache TTL. That's likely here under configuration. Right here. Okay. So we have this set at 1 month. I believe that is Cloudflare's default. We're going to tell it, 30 days, 1 month right there. Otherwise, Google is going to flag you for your browser cache isn't efficient enough. Now we want to turn on the smart tiered caching typology. They've actually moved that out under its own menu item here. Now, why this is important, remember how I described a minute ago of how Cloudflare is serving assets from the closest data center? This is where you turn that on. All you have to do is toggle it on and you're good. And it even gives you a little graphic of how this works. So just toggle that on. That makes your cache much more efficient. I honestly am not quite sure why they don't turn this on by default. It is materially better than other options. All right, one other one that's really good here is this always online. So we're going to scroll down here. It's already on for this site. Now, this is beautiful because how many of you ever gone back and tried to look up a client site that went down on the Wayback Machine, like the web archive machine? And like sometimes it saves a copy of the site and sometimes it doesn't and whatever. This always online feature is going to regularly make sure that your site is being saved up to the web archive. And if for some reason your server is unresponsive, and instead of your site being down, Cloudflare will instead serve a copy from the web archive. Now, that's not ideal because, you've got the banner and, some of the images don't come in quickly and all of that. but it's better than the site being down altogether. And so it'll just do that automatically for you with this always online toggle. So do that. And last of all is crawler hints, which is here. So crawler hints is talking about the index now protocol. So there are a number of search engines like Bing, Yandex, maybe some others that use this index now protocol, which says, okay, instead of us just going out and crawling your website, it may, you may have a brochure site that never changes. And if we're going and crawling it every week or month or whatever, it's just wasting server resources and energy. And so there's this index now protocol that says, all right, when you make a change, your site can ping our search engine like Bing, Yandex, and we'll come index that new content. That's pretty good. So whenever you publish a page or a post or update a page or whatever, Cloudflare now there is a WordPress plugin called Index Now that will do this, but you can offload that to the network simply by toggling on crawler hints. And Cloudflare will go out and it will let Bing and Yandex know, hey, there's new content here to come index. Again, just offloading it off your server and up to the network. All right, we're coming up to time here. I do have some instructions here on connecting your WordPress cache to Cloudflare. And I just want to mention one thing, because a lot of folks get lost right at this step, and it's where do I even go to generate a token to begin with? And it's a little difficult because we have to start up here at our profile, which is weird. I don't understand why. You click your little user icon, you hit profile, and here is where API tokens live. And so you simply create a token using the process that I've outlined here. And that's the token you drop into Lightspeed Cache or WP Rocket or whatever asset optimization plugin you're using to connect it to Cloudflare so that when you publish a new page on your site, the Cloudflare cache is emptied. Very important. All right, I will mention this as well. Let's see. Cloudflare APO. Now, this is basically Cloudflare handling all these settings for you, and it's taken care of. It costs $5 per month per site, and it might make sense if you don't want to get into the details here, although you probably wouldn't be watching this live stream if you didn't want to get into the details. But it does make sense in a lot of cases, like a high traffic blog, or if you have a global audience, or this takes all the HTML, everything, pushes it out to the edge, and Cloudflare just handles it for you. You do need to make sure that if you are using APO, that you've turned on the official Cloudflare WordPress plugin, which is available here, and you've connected it with an API key. You have to do that when you go into that plugin. It makes you connect it. This plugin then does the job of purging Cloudflare for you when content updates. So it can be good. It can speed things up. I've had some sites where it's made a measurable difference and other sites where you really couldn't tell. It's $5 a month. If you're having speed issues, it might be worth just trying it and see if it makes a difference. So I'm going to scroll on down here and leave you with a couple of next steps, and then we'll do Q&A. So at the end of the last live stream, I gave you the homework assignment of just go out and add your site to Cloudflare. Try one. If you've never done Cloudflare before, add a simple site, low impact. It's not going to be a big deal if it breaks. Add it to Cloudflare. Hopefully you did that. And the takeaway today is go back to that same site that you just added to Cloudflare and deploy those 3 sample WAF rules, the security rules, on your site and practice that. Then go through make sure if you have a speed optimization plugin, you connect it with the API key like we just showed. And also change those Cloudflare speed and cache settings that we recommended. And that site's going to be in pretty good shape as far as speed and Cloudflare is concerned. All right, that is a lot. My voice is starting to go away, but we have a bunch of questions that I will endeavor to answer. So if you have a question you'd like to ask, drop it in the Q&A, and also take a quick look. Just open the Q&A and scroll through that list of questions. And if that is a question you would also like to see answered, click the thumbs up icon, and I will start to answer those in the order of upvotes. All right, so we will start with Bonnie. Bonnie says, is the free plan always free, or is there some trigger that forces a paid plan? No, everything we've talked about on both of these live streams is free, aside from the Cloudflare APO, which I just talked about. It's $5 a month per site, right? Everything else is free. Traffic has nothing to do with it. None of that. Now they will, they show you 8 million things over here in the dashboard that are paid features. And so they really, really want you to upgrade, but nothing we've talked about requires any kind of payment, even at high traffic. Great question. Stacy asks, I think we answered this. What happens when someone in a blocked country is using a VPN? Yeah, whatever that VPN is presenting as the country of origin is what Cloudflare sees. There's not really a way to get around that. An anonymous attendee says, how will I know the rules are not working? Great question. And this is where you want to test them to make sure, right? Because the way you know rules aren't working, the rules will be working, but you would have to know that some inappropriate traffic is being blocked. Like you would hear from a customer, hey, I can't access your website because of something, that sort of thing. So these are rules, are like a lock on your door. So you need to make sure that you understand what each of them does. It's also why I gave you 3 rules I think are pretty safe to block things that you really wouldn't need to have accessing your site. So yeah, the only way you would know is that you experienced a block or you were informed of it. Okay, Sue, if I want to block 5 countries but allow the rest, it makes sense to write a block rule, right? Yes, as opposed to adding friendly countries. So you could do it either way. Well, you would do a not in rule, basically. Let's get back to boy. I've forgotten what account is what. Here we go. So here in the security rules that we just set up, our country challenge is it's not in that list. And so that's really how you should do it. Don't do it the other way. Don't make a skip rule for countries that are not in that other list. It gets a little convoluted. It's better to be specific about the countries you do not want to access the site. Okay. Paul is asking, can you briefly talk about SSL certificate renewal when Cloudflare is in use? Sure. So this was one of those areas that we didn't cover a lot in the last one, just because I had Cloudflare. We could go for a month every day on Cloudflare. But basically, it's right here. So Cloudflare Edge certificate. So this is protecting the traffic at the edge where the user views the site in the Cloudflare network. So these are Google Trust certificates that are generated. Let's see if I can even go. Is there even a site here? I don't even think there's a site. We can look at the WP Nathan certificate. Yeah. So, and what you can see here, they're 30-day or April, May, June, July. So it's April, May, June, July, 4-month certificates. They're about to change that, by the way. All of these automatically generated certificates, whether it's Google Trust or Let's Encrypt or Komodo or whatever, they're about to change those to 30 days, I think, in the next year or so. We talked about that during office hours a few weeks ago. But right now, you can see it's issued on April the 16th. It expires on July the 15th. So April to May, May to June, June to July, 3-month, 90-day certificate. And it just handles that in the background. You don't have to think about it. It's going to automatically renew that certificate. So Paul, was that what you were asking? Did that cover it? 90-day certificate, and it just handles it for you, just like Let's Encrypt running on your server with Auto SSL. Same thing. All right. Sue says, I can clear the server cache with Lightspeed. Where do I clear the Cloudflare cache? Well, Sue, the good news is if you have connected your Lightspeed plugin to Cloudflare, it does that for you. Let me get logged in here. So notice, because I have connected Cloudflare in the Lightspeed cache with the API token, it talks to each other. So here in the Cloudflare, in the Lightspeed plugin, there's a purge everything link for Cloudflare, but when I do purge all, it's going to purge the Lightspeed cache, the CSS JavaScript cache, the Cloudflare cache, all the caches get purged with the purge all. So once you do purge all once in Lightspeed, it clears everything. Finally, from Stacy, do we use Let's Encrypt and Cloudflare certificates together? Yes, you certainly can. So we talked about that last time, and really just for the sake of time, I'd encourage you to go back to that first session because we talked about SSL some there and there's a graphic that shows, well, we can just pull it up here real quick. It's under overview. Yeah, so right here, this is the visitor, and this is the Google Trust certificate we just saw that Cloudflare makes between the browser and Cloudflare. And this certificate is the one that your server provides that covers traffic between Cloudflare and your server. And this certificate can be either a self-signed certificate that your server will just create, or it can be a certificate authority certificate like Let's Encrypt or Komodo or whatever. And so either way, Let's Encrypt works right here, or a self-signed certificate. It doesn't matter. So if you're using Cloudflare, Let's Encrypt or something similar running on your server is not nearly as important because it's just as secure with a self-signed certificate. That brings us to the end of questions. Well, hopefully this has been a good use of your time and you've picked up a few things. I'm going to drop in the download link one more time there in the chat. And so you can grab that download if you missed it. All right. If you have questions remaining, or if you get into this and you get confused, no problem. That's why we have office hours every Thursday, this same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, every Thursday. So make sure you've registered for office hours. I'm going to drop in our link tree one more time here. If I can type the right word. There we go. So if you've not registered for office hours, you can do so right there at that link to register for all of our upcoming live streams. We would love to have you as part of office hours. It's always a lot of fun. Until Thursday, have a great rest of the day. I'll see you back here, office hours, Thursday, right here on hosting.com's Agency Success, where we go further together.